most agencies, they don't have a candidate problem. Most of the time, they have a preparation problem.
Good leadership ideas don't automatically make somebody ready to step into leadership. There is this gap between knowing something and doing it. Mentoring with structure is what builds the readiness. And
Leadership development helps people grow. Leadership readiness prepares them to carry the next role. Leadership readiness means you can think from the next seat before you sit in it. The next role requires a different level of thinking. Strong performance and leadership readiness are not the same thing.
yeah, that process of promotion should confirm readiness, not be the instrument that reveals the lack of readiness.
You're listening to the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast.
Here, law enforcement leaders gain practical tools to lead proactively in a reactive profession so they can communicate clearly, strengthen internal trust, and stay grounded in their call to serve.
I'm Mike McIntosh, a retired sheriff and current division chief with nearly 4 decades in law enforcement leadership.
And I'm Cathy McIntosh, a business and branding strategist and longtime law enforcement wife. I focus on the human side of leadership, communication, identity, and the internal dynamics that impact performance and trust across an organization.
Together, we combine real-world command experience with clear, actionable leadership conversations.
So you can lead with intention, build stronger teams, and elevate your call to service. Welcome back to the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast. We're going to talk about mentoring today and the difference between mentoring and leadership and how they dovetail together. Good leadership ideas are very important for anyone who's an aspiring leader. And oftentimes that comes through things like training materials, books, conferences, conversations about leadership. But good leadership ideas don't automatically make somebody ready to step into leadership. There is this gap between knowing something and doing it. So knowing what leadership should look like and actually leading when the pressure gets very, very real. It's one thing, as we know, to talk about good communication and accountability, decision-making, conflict, ethics, even culture. And it's entirely another thing to apply all of that when people are frustrated, when the situation may look unclear, when stakes are very high, and when the decision rests on your shoulders. And that's where mentorship becomes very important in the readiness portion of getting ready to lead. And today we want to make a clear distinction. I've been involved in mentoring programs in the past, and they were more about meeting for coffee or sharing stories about a career or just checking in with somebody that you like to get some encouragement or be reminded that you have great potential. And all of those things build very strong, sound relationships that are also important, but mentoring with structure is what builds the readiness. And structured mentoring is different. It takes mentoring to a whole different level. It helps future leaders start to work through real situations as they happen, specific leadership themes, decisions that can get sticky, personnel issues, conflict, accountability, and pressure before they're carrying the full weight of the role.
Yeah, when I think about this, it's you know, most agencies, they don't have a candidate problem. Most of the time, they have a preparation problem. When that promotional process starts, that's when we see this gap become very, very clear. There's this thought that strong performers at one level are prepared to lead at the next, and that's not necessarily the case. So today, what we want to do is answer this question. How can mentorship help bridge the gap between good leadership ideas and real-world leadership? And more specifically, how does leadership mentoring help future leaders become ready before the promotional process starts? why does mentoring need structure? And how can agencies use mentorship to protect standards instead of lowering them when the vacancies become urgent?
Before we start moving into that mentoring side, I want you to define something that we talk about a lot, and that's leadership readiness. Can you just tell us what that means to you? You use the word readiness often and very intentionally. So tell me why is that important? What's the difference?
Leadership development is very broad. It could be books, it could be training, and those things are very valuable. It exposes people to leadership ideas and it helps them grow. But leadership readiness is more specific. This is when we're drilling down into what that leadership looks like in the role that they're aspiring to or the next role that they're going to. This readiness asks whether someone is prepared for the responsibility of the next role. Leadership development helps people grow. Leadership readiness prepares them to carry to the next role. It helps them be prepared for that next role. Leadership readiness is not just about learning more. It's about preparing to lead when the responsibility becomes yours. When you get the job, it's about preparing you to be ready to lead. It means someone is learning to think, to decide, to communicate, and to respond at the level that they're promoting into, that next step. It often means asking questions like, can you think beyond your current assignment? Can they see the bigger picture? Can they make decisions with the next level of responsibility in mind? How do they communicate when the situation might be tense? How do they handle conflict? Can they hold people accountable? Can they protect those standards, those policies? And can they lead when the situation is not clear or even when the situation is not easy? You see, leadership readiness means you can think from the next seat before you sit in it. And that's really the goal. That's where we want to be. To me, that is one of those definitions of readiness. A person can be excellent in their current role, but it does not equate, or it doesn't mean that they're now ready to lead in the next role, in that next level. And what I don't want our listeners to get confused in is that doesn't mean that they lack talent. It certainly doesn't mean that they lack potential. What it means is the next role requires a different level of thinking. It's a different level of judgment, of communication, accountability, and responsibility. Strong performance and leadership readiness are not the same thing.
I know that you have been through, I cannot even imagine how many promotional processes you've been through in 40 years. And you've been the one that's been trying to be promoted, and you've been the one who is selecting who gets promoted. And more times than not, when you are on an oral board or the panel that's making the decisions, you will come home and we'll talk about it. And most of the time, I don't know who's who and what's what. And most of the names I've never heard of. But you say, this person didn't even really know what it means to be a commander or
Right.
a lieutenant or whatever they were moving into. They just had not even wrapped their mind around the kind of responsibility that they were trying to be promoted into.
Yeah, and there's a lot of times when they'll be encouraged to go through the process.
Yeah.
They'll be encouraged
Yeah.
to promote. And they're encouraged to promote because they're such a strong performer at that either deputy level or sergeant level or commander level. But that doesn't mean that they're prepared for that next level. And the promotional process, it often reveals this readiness gap. People may test well in some areas, but struggle when asked to think like they're in the next rank. They may understand the job that they currently have, but they don't understand the responsibility of the role that they want. If the first time an agency identifies that gap is during the promotional process, they're already behind.
Mm. Yeah, that process of promotion should confirm readiness, not be the instrument that reveals the lack of readiness.
Right. Those promotional processes, that's what demonstrates if that readiness is going to show up under pressure, because they'll put them under pressure in an assessment center or through that process. It shows up in conflict and how it is that they deal with that. It shows up in uncertainty. It shows up when there's no perfect answer. And these are real life situations that they're going to face in that next role. It shows up when someone has to have the hard conversation. It shows up when the easy path is to avoid the issue, but the right path is to address it.
For sure.
Readiness is not just knowing more. It's being prepared to lead when the responsibility becomes yours.
I would love for you to connect this to some of your own experiences. And I know that there have been times when you promoted to the next rank and then started to realize, wow, I have the title now, but I really don't have the ongoing support. How in the world am I going to figure all this out?
Yeah, I would say that one of the biggest jumps for me in my career is when I went from sergeant to lieutenant. It was at a time when a new sheriff came in, and really the promotional process was to meet with the sheriff and talk about what his expectations were at that next level. And I was very fortunate because the sheriff already knew me well, knew who I was, knew my dedication to the job, the way that I prepared myself. But I would tell you that I went into that role, got the job, and was I tease about it a lot, but I was handed a set of office keys and a set of car keys, and kind of a pat on the shoulder, and was told, congratulations. Good
You're going to be
luck.
great.
You're going to do a great job. And if you need any help, if something isn't clear to you, come see me and we'll get this figured out.
Yeah, that's not a lot of ongoing support. And I know that sheriff was there for you. I know that you had leaders that were there for you. But there's also this sense of pride that you have, like, oh, I was appointed to this position, or I earned this position, and I should have my stuff together. It's going to look really bad for me if I have to ask a lot of questions. And wow, wouldn't a mentor have been amazing?
It would have been incredible. And I think that so many times I've seen it throughout my career that this happens. And every time we do that to somebody, they're put in that position of they're going to fake it until they make it, or they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And is that really what we want for our employees, especially those that are promoting into those higher leadership positions, because they're going to be running teams, or they're going to be running and responsible for divisions. So it's really important that we work on that readiness aspect.
So how does a mentorship program support preparing somebody to carry the next role?
That mentorship program helps people take those leadership ideas, and please don't hear me saying that those leadership classes, the books, the conferences, that they're not important, because they are. That's where you're taught the concepts of leadership. And you really get to vet a lot of that out in those classes. But what the mentorship program does is it helps apply those leadership principles to real situations that are going on, not just in law enforcement, but real life situations that are going on in your agency. This training, this mentorship training, it's really there to take those concepts and put it into action. The books and the conferences can give us the language. So what we're looking to do is take this mentorship program and turn leadership development into leadership readiness. And that is why mentoring is so important in leadership. It gives our future leaders a place to practice judgment before the stakes are higher. It gives you that relationship where it's safe to ask questions, it's safe to share ideas, and it's an opportunity to get feedback before maybe a habit that's not a good one becomes permanent. It helps them build confidence before they're isolated in the role. And it helps them learn from real situations before they're the final decision maker.
So in other words, it helps a future leader practice everything that they need to do before the responsibility fully belongs to them. They start to put on the mindset. They start to think through the processes. They start to just envision the situations that they're facing and that they're going to be stepping into. So they're not going in cold. It's almost like a pitcher in a baseball game warms up before they take the mound.
Yep.
They come in warm. They come in ready. They come in with with a couple of pitches in their repertoire so that they know exactly how to handle it.
Let me ask you something. When your teens talk about your leadership, what do you hope they say? Trust isn't automatic. Respect isn't inherited with rank. Both are built intentionally. Many sergeants and lieutenants are carrying more responsibility than they were ever formally prepared for. And many are wondering whether they're truly ready for the next step. Coaching creates space to slow down, reflect, and lead on purpose. We've seen leaders restore unity in divided teams. We've seen aspiring leaders step into promotions with steady confidence. If that's the kind of intentional growth that matters to you, go to leleaders.com and schedule a conversation. We'll meet you where you are, and we'll build a plan that fits your role and your goals.
Yeah, and when you look at that concept, I mean, look at all of the practice that goes on and the real life scenario that they're put into when they start pitching even to their teammates in spring training, and that's what this mentorship does, is it gives them an opportunity to really identify where they're strong and identify where they may need to further practice their trade.
So we've talked about mentorship is more than just meeting for coffee. Mentorship is more than just sharing stories about your career. Why does it need structure, and how does it get structure?
First of all, that relationship, it matters.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to build that relationship in order to start to develop trust.
Mm-hmm.
Because unless you have that, you're not going to be able to have those more difficult conversations that you might need to have, or that people can be real when it comes to a good, honest critique of where they're at and where they need to go. It also allows for that person being mentored to be vulnerable and know that mentor has their back. Those conversations that you start with, and it might be over coffee, they're going to have value. Stories can be powerful, but we have to move on from that.
That's not where you want to stay. You don't want to stay camped out in reliving the good old days and telling you what a great leader I was or am, or how many mistakes I made.
Right. Right. That mentorship, it needs purpose. That mentorship, it needs direction. And it should focus on specific leadership themes, on specific situations, and specific incidents. That structured mentorship needs to focus on communication and accountability, conflict, ethics, culture, decision-making, critical incidents, leading under pressure, leading former peers, managing up and down. But here's the key with that program. It's specific to the agency that you're working in, because all of that is a different, it's a culture in and of itself, and that culture is going to be different from agency to agency. And that's what we lose in those great leadership programs that we send people to. The overall principles of leadership, those are phenomenal. But bringing them back to the agency, having a structured program to where we can take those principles and apply them specifically to our agency and specifically to the role that we're going into.
So when we say that mentoring needs to be structured, that does not mean that you have to script every meeting or that you have to be stiff and formal every time. It just means that you have certain criteria that you want to make sure that you cover so that readiness is developed. It means that it's consistent throughout the agency when structure happens, so that when you and an upcoming leader are meeting and Tim is meeting with Jane, you're covering the same types of things. You're looking from the same types of angles. So everybody's starting to see the big picture together, and it's unified, it's cohesive, and it's, as I said, consistent. And that's really one of the strong benefits of a structured program.
You know, there's mentorship programs that are out there that seem to be informal, and it's more of a relational type, like we talked about earlier. And those are great. Those are great for building relationships, for building trust. The problem is some people get developed and others don't. Mm-hmm. And if there's not consistency in that, there's a lot of folks that don't benefit from receiving the same information. Really, what ends up happening is others are left to figure it out on their own. And we've seen that happen way too many times. Leadership expectations can vary by shift, by unit, or supervisor. But when you build a readiness mentorship program, those leadership expectations are actually set by the executive staff of the organization. Mm-hmm. And those expectations then transcend the entire organization, which leads that consistency in the way that you do things within your organization.
And each mentor would still bring their own take on things, their own experience, their own personality, their own wisdom, their own stories. Right. All of that still happens, and it is very important, but the overarching principles are consistent and repeatable, and something that everybody can benefit from.
Right. That it gives that shared language. It gives future leaders consistent themes, so that when folks want to move to the next level, you can put them in one of these programs and they start getting that consistent information and understand what the expectations are. It helps the agency develop people at the same level and around those same expectations. It doesn't, like you said, it doesn't remove that individuality, because mentors still bring their own experiences, their personality, and their wisdom, but it's in this structured format.
So explain to me what role mid-level leaders would play as a mentor. So executives might support leadership development, but it's the lieutenants and the commanders the experienced supervisors who are going to have to carry the day-to-day mentoring role, right? So typically a sheriff or a chief is not going to be the one doing the mentoring. How do mid-level leaders play the role of building readiness?
Yeah, I think that's where the key to the success of a mentorship, a structured mentorship program lies. If you really want that readiness, it has to be those mid-level. It has to be, in some organizations it's a lieutenant, some it's a commander or a captain. Those are the ones that need to be the mentors. Those are the ones that need to be the ones that are driving this program. And they're going to have to go through, for the lack of a better term, a train the trainer, so that they all understand at the same level what the expectations of the executive staff is. And the executive staff has to set those expectations. They're the ones that have to ensure that the structure of the program is headed in the direction that they want it. And then the lieutenants, the commanders, the captains, they're the ones that are close enough to the employees that can see who's ready to move to that next level, right? They're the ones that see that potential early on in folks. They're the ones that see their employees in real situations. They're also the ones that are dealing with and trying to combat the agency pressures. They're the ones that understand the culture of the organization, both above them and below them. They can connect strategy to daily behavior because they're in it every day. They're the ones that are should be modeling what leadership looks like in their organization. And again, I go back to that consistency. That's where it's so important that we get those commanders, those lieutenants, consistent in what it is that they're teaching and training those that are coming up below them. And even, those that are wanting and aspire to do the job that they're doing. They can help those future leaders interpret what happened and what it means. And they can transfer their experience. And it's so important that they can transfer their experience before it walks out the door. Being able to retain and grow, develop, and promote from within has such an incredible impact on our retention in an organization and really our success in being an organization that is operating at a high level.
Those high-performing teams that you talk about.
Right.
Yep. Because the internal mentors are the ones who know the agency standards, the expectations that you talked about, the day-to-day realities of what's actually going on inside an agency.
Yeah. They've either experienced it or they've dealt with it. They've been a part of it. They're the ones that truly should be developing our future leaders.
So for any executive level leaders that are listening, what should they be paying attention to if they want to know whether or not their agency is truly developing future leaders? A lot of times I think, well, I send people to Northwestern, or so-and-so's going to the FBI National Academy, or there's this class or that class, and they feel like they've checked the box of leadership development, but there's more to it than that. So what should they be paying attention to?
Well, one of the first things that they need to be involved in is identifying whether or not we have future leaders. And are those future leaders being identified early on in their career? And then are you equipping your mentors? Are your leadership expectations clear? Is that mentorship happening across the agency, or is it only happening in pockets? And I will tell you that in most organizations, it's not an organizational mentorship program. It's more individualized. So you may have a sergeant that wants to be a commander and ask a commander to be their mentor. And that's an individual process. Some people get the opportunity to be mentored, and some people don't. And then what are we doing once we promote the leaders? Are they being supported? And a structured mentorship program allows that support after they get promoted into that position.
Mm-hmm.
Are the leadership standards consistent across the units and across the shifts? As we discussed earlier, it's the readiness question.
Mm-hmm.
Is readiness being developed before testing?
Mm-hmm.
Is the agency relying on chance? We've talked about, hope is not a strategy.
Not a strategy.
Chance is not a strategy. Or are they building a system? Are people being prepared before the vacancy becomes urgent?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so many times in organizations across the country, we get so busy. Things happen so fast to us. Retirements happen sometimes out of nowhere. And we're left in a position of, we've got to run a process, and we haven't necessarily taken the time to prepare people to go through that process.
Mm-hmm. We're at the part of our episode where it's time to issue a challenge to our listeners. What's one thing that they can do this week to start to apply some of the principles that we've talked about here?
So we've talked a lot about a structured mentorship program
Mm-hmm.
within an organization. If you have one, do everything that you can to keep that,
Mm-hmm.
and then do everything that you can to enhance that. And if you need help with that, let us know. We can help you
For
with
real.
that. For real. Yes, let us know. My fear is a lot of times we have to have leaders within an organization take those bold steps and reach out to folks that are experienced in putting programs like this together, because it does get so busy. What I will also tell you is you may not have the opportunity to do that. You might be in an organization where you have to be that one person that steps up. And I would encourage them to pick one real situation from this week or last week. Pick one leadership theme, whether it's communication, accountability, ethics, culture, and have a structured mentoring conversation with those that you have influence over. Ask, what did you notice? What leadership issue was involved? How would you handle it as the sergeant? How would you handle it as the commander? And then give feedback. Have good, honest conversations, and have those with the thought of mentoring and readiness.
So you're having a conversation with a purpose. And that's really how leadership mentoring starts, and how it starts turning experience into readiness.
Yeah.
With everything that we've talked about today, it comes back to one main idea, and that is good leadership ideas are not enough if future leaders never get help applying what they've learned. And mentorship is important because it gives people a place to process before it's costly.
Right.
Mentoring, though, has to be very intentional. It's not just coffee or encouragement or stories. It's about building readiness.
Yeah. I would say that this is what agencies need to start preparing their leaders for. We want to do that. We want to start that preparation before that vacancy becomes urgent. Most agencies have incredible people. They have great talent and potential, but potential has to be developed, experience has to be transferred, and judgment has to be practiced. And like you said at the beginning of this, most agencies don't have a candidate problem, they have a preparation problem. And when mentorship is structured around real leadership themes and real situations that happens within their organization, within their agency, it helps people grow into the standard before the organization needs them in that seat. That mentorship, it protects standards by helping people grow into them.
And that's a great place to leave it. We want to make sure that leaders are prepared before they promote and they're supported after they promote.
If today's episode added value, don't let it end here.
Share it with someone on your command staff or leadership team, because strong leadership isn't built in isolation.
And if you're ready to develop or become proactive leaders inside your organization,
leaders who communicate clearly and strengthen internal trust,
then visit leleaders.com to learn more about our coaching programs, workshops, and keynotes.
And if the podcast has been helpful, we'd appreciate your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.
Until next time, lead with clarity, lead with conviction, and elevate your call to service.